All right, we're back. And today there's no intro other than this. We're going to get straight into working on the engine. You're not going to have to listen to me rant and ramble for a long period of time. We're going straight into working on the engine, and I'm going to do an outro afterwards. So here we go. The first thing we're doing today is we're installing our Melling high volume oil pump on the bottom of the engine. We have our pickup here. This is one of the parts that, if you saw my Facebook picture, this is one of the old, nasty, disgusting, rusted parts that Christopher cleaned up really well, and it looks awesome. We've kind of flow tested it to make sure it's going to flow, and the only problem we're having today is that Melling sent us one gasket instead of the two they're supposed to send. So what we're going to do now is we're going to install the oil pump onto the engine block over here using the gasket they included. This piece here is just hand tight, and we're just gonna, before we finish the engine, we're gonna have to come back and put a gasket in here. We couldn't get one today, so it's just kind of a minor annoyance more than anything else. But right now I'm going to demonstrate exactly how the oil pump works. So this is our oil pickup down here in a tub of oil where we're soaking some parts in oil. And this is our oil pump drive shaft. I've got a 1/4-inch socket on it, and this is how it works. The distributor cap spins this, and as you can see, our oil pump is working. And that's how it's going to work on the engine. This has also primed our oil pump, so it is ready to use now. Chris Jr. is now going to install the oil pump in the pickup unit. Yeah, set that on there, let that hold that. Here are your 2 bolts. Just line that up and kind of lay it there for a second. And take the first bolt and just kind of hand tighten it. Pick your side. Did it thread? Does it feel like it's going in?
Yep.
All right, good. I'll just pop in the other one for you real quick. And then we're going to come back and torque these. So we didn't videotape all of this. It turns out that the gasket that Melling did give us was the gasket between the pickup and the oil pump housing. So I didn't know that. I thought they're basically the same gasket. They're not. So what right now, this is just hand tight. We do not have a gasket between the oil pump and the block, which is fine for now because we are not going to pressurize anything. Right now it's just hand tight, and we're just going to leave it hand tight for a little while and move on to the top half of the engine. We have an oil pan. We have an oil pan gasket. We have oil pan bolts and retaining or support beams. We have everything for the bottom of the engine, but we're not putting it on right now because what we don't have is a bolt kit for the front timing cover. So all of that will have to be next time. And moving on now, we have our head dowels. The head dowels go in the bottom head bolt on each side of the engine. We're going to use a rubber mallet and we're going to hammer it in. All right, go ahead, Chris. Hammer in one of the dowels. Just set it in there, tap it in. Make sure it's square in the hole. Now hit it. All right, the head dowel's in, and we're going to do that 3 more times. Chris Jr. has our head gasket. He's going to lay it on the dowel pins here and push it on. All right, we're going to check and make sure that none of the head gasket hangs over the cylinder and hits the piston here, which it appears that all of them are clear. Head gaskets are marked with a front label, so that goes to the front of the engine. The pretty shiny side that you read faces up, and now we are ready to bolt on our heads. All right, Chris, get our head on there. Line up all the holes, line up the dowel pins. That one's on.
This one's
How's this one doing?
on.
Is that on?
No.
Let's see. No, that one is not on.
Now this one's not on.
Okay. We found out why Chris couldn't get the head on. This head already has a block dowel pin stuck inside it. So now we're going to have to perform a little bit of surgery. That's my fault. I did not check the heads enough, and I didn't even notice that thing sitting in there. That's why he couldn't get the head on. So we'll be back in a little while once we figure this out. All right, I did a little emergency surgery on the head. I couldn't videotape it and fix it, but I was able to use a drill bit to coax the old dowel pin out of the head. And now Christopher is installing the head on the engine. I did not put power from a drill to the dowel pin or the head. These are aluminum heads. Steel drill bits will destroy them. I just stuck it in with my hand and spun it a little until it gripped and then pulled the dowel pin out.
That one. This one. This one.
Are they both on?
This one doesn't seem like it's on. Oh, now it is.
Does it move? Does the head float? Or is it stuck? Okay, the dowel pin's doing its job. All right, now it's time to bolt it down. Now we're ready to torque down our heads. So what we're going to do is the shorty bolts go up front and the long bolts go in the back. Now Christopher is over here prepping all our bolts. The long bolts, all they'll get is a little bit of break-in lubricant on the top of the bolt. But the short bolts actually go into the water jacket into the block. The short bolts will actually get some thread sealant, like some gasket seal on the end of them, and then some assembly lubricant up top up here. So they're going to be prepped a little bit differently, and he's about to install them. All right, a step we almost forgot about is our head bolt adapters. We have our Trick Flow Specialties adapters. See, this is a 302 block, and the 302 block uses 7/16 bolts. But these Edelbrock heads are made for the 302 or the 351, and the 351 uses 1/2-inch head bolts. So what we're having to do is we're having to drop these in these holes, and then we're having to torque the bolts on top of them. This will keep our head from floating around and moving around. Otherwise, the bolt holes in the heads are too big for the bolts for this 302. Christopher is prepping all our bolts right now. We're just about to get started torquing them down. Okay, so we have the driver's side head on. The bolt adapters are in. All 10 bolts are in. All 10 bolts have been prepped. Now Christopher is going to start with 25 foot-pounds starting in the tall center bolt. And he's going to torque this down to 25 foot-pounds. And then he's going to torque every bolt from 25 foot-pounds to 50 foot-pounds to 70 foot-pounds. But we're not going to show you all that. We're just going to do it once and be done with it. All right, there we go. Moving on. Working. For those who don't know, anytime you torque down a head, always start in the middle and then work your way out in a cross-hatching pattern. Okay? Don't ever start on one end and torque it down. You start in the middle, 25 pounds, you work your way out to the outside, 25 pounds, then you start over 50 in the middle, work your way out, then 70. You always do that every time. You never start on one end or torque out of order. All right, Chris has already done 25 foot-pounds. Make sure to put pressure on here to keep that torque wrench flat. Now we're doing 50. There you go. All right, and we're going to move on and do all the other bolts to 50. All right, apparently I didn't have the camera on earlier. Christopher is on his round of 70 foot-pounds per bolt. He's already got 3 in. He's working on number 4. And it takes all of his body weight to get 70 foot-pounds of torque on a bolt. There you go. All right. Good job, buddy. Hey, Chris, are you having fun?
No, this.
All right. And here we go. We have both heads installed. Both of our Edelbrock Performer RPM heads are bolted down to 70 foot-pounds all around. We've got our head gaskets on. Now we're going to move on to the valve train. We're going to install the lifters and the push rods and the roller rockers. Here we have our Ford Motorsport hydraulic roller lifters and our push rods and our oil pump push rod, which we'll install here in just a moment. They've been soaking in oil for a couple of days to get all the air bubbles out of them, and we're going to install them. All right, Christopher is getting our roller lifter here. He's going to install it with the oiling holes facing up. And he's just going to slide it in underneath the head into the lifter valley. Yep, that's it. And we're going to do that 15 more times. All right. We finally wrestled all of our hydraulic roller lifters into the block. A couple of them did not want to go down without a fight. These are designed to take off with the heads installed, but a couple of them did not want to fit. Christopher is now installing our Ford Performance or Ford Racing push rods, and the push rod guides on these heads were already lined up pretty well straight. So far they've been right on target, so I'm just leaving them. They came that way, and I'm not going to mess with what works. These came off a running engine, so we're just going to use what's given to us. The push rods are in the guide plates. Christopher is now installing our Comp Cams 1.6 ratio aluminum roller rockers. As you can see, the push rod goes back up into the roller rocker. The push rod goes all the way down here into the hydraulic roller lifter. And if we've done everything correctly and the engine has proper oil pressure, the engine oil will come up through the roller or through the lifter, through the push rod, through the top of the roller rocker, and we'll oil all our springs and our valve train. And as soon as we get all of these installed, then we're going to go and we're going to... A step we completely forgot earlier, all my fault, is we have to put our hold downs for our hydraulic roller lifters so they don't turn in the bores. So you just come in here. You're supposed to do these earlier, but it doesn't really matter. They just sit in place, and then we're going to put our spider hold down on top of them. All right, and this is what we call the spider. This is the hold down, and it keeps the valve train in place so it doesn't come out of alignment, and our roller lifters don't spin on our camshaft and cause any damage. Junior's just going to tighten these down. They don't have real torque specs. Just tighten them down till they're snug, and this will hold our valve train in place. See if I can get a little light on there so we can see. Okay, we are now ready to adjust our valve train. We have all our rockers in place. They are set, and now we are gonna tighten them down and adjust them by rotating the engine, and we're gonna get right on that. We're gonna start by rotating the engine to where the valve and piston number 1 comes all the way up. Whichever valve comes all the way up first, and I can't remember which one that is. All right, looks like the intake valve is all the way up and the exhaust valve is all the way down. So we're now going to tighten the exhaust valve. All right, as you can see, the exhaust valve is all the way up. So the intake valve is down in the base circle of the cam. We're going to adjust the intake valve. All right, Christopher, tighten it down. He is going to tighten that down until this quits freely spinning in my hand. All right, that feels good right there, Christopher. Okay, now take this straight up and turn it half turn till it's straight down. All right, hold that right there. Use your Allen wrench to tighten down the key all the way down. turn it the other way and torque it down really well. You gotta turn it this way. Torque it down. Okay, so that one is adjusted. That roller rocker is ready to run. Now we have to do that 15 more times. And that is it. So once we got the hang of it, it took Junior probably 30 seconds to adjust each valve. And now we get to watch the rotating assembly actually rotate. You can see all the lifters and the valves going up and down.
It's like pushing air at me.
As Chris just said, you can actually feel air pushing out of the cylinders as everything goes up and down. So that's it. We're going to go and I'm going to do a little outro where what we've got coming up, the next steps. But that's it as far as actually working on the engine today. Thanks for watching. All right, and that is it for this part of the engine build. We've got the rotating assembly together. The next video will probably be us taking apart our T5 manual transmission. We can't rebuild it just yet. The rebuild kits for the T5 more than doubled in price in the last few months. The $300 T5 rebuild kit that was probably the most popular is gone. It isn't a thing anymore. The new part number for all the rebuild kits is about $600 and something. So it's going to be a while. But what we're going to do is we're going to take apart the transmission and we're going to see what all it needs internally. Make sure it doesn't need anything more than a basic rebuild kit. It doesn't want to shift into fourth gear just sitting in the garage floor over there. It doesn't want to go into fourth gear, which worries me. I'm afraid that there's actually something wrong in the fourth gear cluster, something physically hitting that's not allowing it to move versus one of the soft replaceable parts. So we're going to take it apart and make sure. The reason we didn't finish the entire engine as far as the upper intake, the oil pan, all of that is really right now the price of bolts. We're missing a lot of bolts. Just to bolt on the front water cover to the front of the engine is $100, just because they're a specialty set of bolts that have studs in the front of them for mounting the water pump. But it's $100 just to put the front timing cover on. And I was hoping to find those bolts somewhere in the garage, and it hasn't happened. So it's things like that. We have a whole lot of other accessories. Of course, now we need an oil pump gasket that Melling didn't give us. I'm hoping I can get just a single gasket somewhere. So it's little things like that. We couldn't put the front timing cover on. We have a bolt kit from the upper to the lower intake, but we don't have a bolt kit for the lower intake to the engine. So we can't fit that on right now. Just some random little things. Hopefully we'll get to that here soon, but with the way the price of bolts and parts are going, I'm hoping I can find some secondhand or some junk or something like that to be able to use. Do you have anything to add, Chris? All right. So we'll get back to it here again in a few weeks. In 2 weeks, when I'm off for the weekend, we'll either take apart the transmission or do something else related to the car. We're going to try to do it every other weekend when I'm off. We're going to try to do something to the car to keep working on it. Coming up here pretty soon, if we don't do the transmission next, then we may just completely empty out the car to start the body work on it. That's the stuff that isn't what I consider fun, but we have to empty out the car. We've got to scrub and grind all the rust off of it. We need to prime and paint under the hood, the cross member, the control arms, a lot of just dirty, slow, boring work. And then we've got to work our way into the interior of the car. We've got to clean up the roll cage, which has got a lot of surface rust on it. A lot of dust, a lot of cobwebs from sitting for over 20 years. So when we can't do the fun stuff like work on the engine, rebuild the transmission, we're going to have to do the unfun stuff. We're going to have to get the car rolling again. We're going to have to make sure the rear end actually moves and rolls and functions. The rear drum brakes, yes, there are drum brakes on it. The rear drum brakes are probably rusted into one giant piece. So we've got a lot of stuff to do. And we'll make videos on the stuff that we think you might find entertaining. And the rest of it, we probably won't. But thanks for joining us. See you next time.